grateful for your presence and time that you've committed to setting aside a moment for yourself. And today we're going to spend some time looking at some intentional principles for having a whole food, plant forward holiday. But it's more than that. It brings in principles of lifestyle medicine and principles that I've learned through my extensive studies in Ayurveda. And these are things that I began to realize that as the year winds down, we tend to feel heavier, more congested. And that can come from a variety of things. It can come from circadian rhythm changes, emotional intensity that arrives in the holiday season. It can come from foods we're eating more of, or even the possibility that we're drinking more alcohol, some of us, than we're used to. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about why this is a topic that's so near and dear to my heart. So I come from generations of women who have very complicated relationships to the kitchen. So this is me, my mom, my grandma, and my great Aunt Thelma. Now, great Aunt Thelma was my mom's mom's sister. Mom's mom, my grandma's sister, or my grandma's mother passed away quite young. So Aunt Thelma was a really strong presence in my life, in my mom's life. Great Aunt Thelma held the reins as being sort of the family entertainer. She was a master cook, spent a lot of time entertaining, and my grandma and my mom, they grew up not being allowed in the kitchen when this older generation would cook. And as a result of that, they didn't really have a joy of entertaining or a joy of being in the kitchen. It felt more like a burden. And so I think it's important for us to always just acknowledge what is the culture of the kitchen I grew up in, and how is that shaping how I think about it in my own life now. So this is something that I've given a fair amount of thought to, as you might imagine. And finding opportunities to cook and share about cooking are things that have remained an important part of my career. I don't have any commercial interests to disclose today. I love being a voice for the plants. My medical background, I'm an internal medicine trained clinician from the Mayo Clinic, and I've done a fellowship at the Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine, where I also taught nutrition for almost 15 years and sort of their culinary medicine principles. And I'm board certified in integrative medicine, internal medicine, lifestyle, hospice, and palliative medicine. So let's just take a moment together to arrive to this time that you've set aside. And if you can, just take this sweet moment, I would say, right? It's busy, it's holiday season, there's probably a lot of demands on your time and your energy. And just notice your feet on the ground. Just noticing your feet on the ground, and gently close your eyes. Gently closing the eyes. And just feeling a wave of relaxation coming from the top of your head through your whole body. From the top of your head through your whole body. Just feel that wave. And as you notice a wave of relaxation, just noticing the breath, a deep inhale and a deep exhale. And as you exhale, bring a sigh with it. Inhaling deeply and then sighing. Ah. Inhaling deeply. Ah. You feel your shoulders come down with that deep sigh. And inhaling one more time. And exhaling deeply. Ah. Yeah. And move your shoulders a little, roll them. Just noticing any kind of changes or warmth that comes from that big exhale, letting the shoulders soften, feeling your feet on the ground, and allowing yourself to recognize and honor the gift that you've given yourself for putting this time aside. I'm so grateful that you've done that. And again, just taking this moment, noticing points of tension, and letting that warmth and energy move through your body, coming down like a warm ray of relaxation. And one more big inhale and a big exhale with a sigh. So inhaling deeply. Yes, I can feel that too. It's always a little bit hectic to get a webinar going. So I do want to do a land acknowledgement, and the land that I'm currently living on, which is in Boston and Cambridge, while my husband is studying to get a master's degree from the Divinity School, is that I am on the Massachusetts, the Wampanoag, and the Nipmuc land. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge the early settlers' process that probably it has for many invoked trauma and harm. So it's especially at this season, I think it's so valuable to think about the patterns and beliefs that emerged with the early settlers and how the indigenous populations were taken advantage of, and that trauma carries forward into this modern time. So for some people, it's very valid and very important to recognize that they're not in a holiday season. So I'd like for you to just take a moment. And again, I love this idea that giving gratitude and being grateful is deeply woven into the themes of Thanksgiving. So we don't want to separate ourselves from that really beautiful sentiment. And so I think it's important if you have a journal, if you like to put it into the chat, I'd always love to hear. What is something in this season of your life that you're most grateful for? And again, this is just a lens to bring awareness into our internal world, into the interior thoughts. It may take a moment or two before you have a sense of what I'm grateful for, because there could be a lot of things that are demanding time, energy, bandwidth that are hard to be grateful for. So I want to acknowledge that. And then the next thing I'd like to offer you, and you can just keep track in your notes or wherever in your head, is I'd like you to take a moment and think about what you'd like to feel through this holiday season. Would you like to see the presence of patience and or curiosity, joy? There's a lot of different qualities that we may want to see be present in our holiday season. And I always like to point out that sometimes qualities that we are cultivating or leaning in towards may be in competition with each other. So let me give you an example of this, because we can't always do all of them at once. So here's one example. Let's say this is the year that I'm leaning into new traditions. I want to create a new holiday game. I want to bring new dishes into my family gathering. I have new family members I'm welcoming. And I have a difficult relationship with my mother or mother in law or father in law. And I want to learn how to be more patient with them when I feel frustration at the relationship. So we can see how, if the priority is really being present with someone who's difficult, which we all know the holidays can bring, which requires energy of being patient, being non reactive, that might be in competition with, I want this really extra Thanksgiving this year. And so, again, it's that navigating, it's that inner knowing of what the limits of our energy and bandwidth are. What are we also committed to? Do we have busy clinics? Do we have busy work schedules? Are we the ones doing most of the cooking? Do we have a team helping us, the family leaning in with us? So it's good to just recognize what's an important value, an important principle I want to lean into through this holiday season. And then the third thing I'd love for you to think about is, what could I did enough mean for you today in terms of the holiday season? What does enough, what does I did enough feel like? So often, especially as caregivers and empathic people, which tend to be my immediate community, we always feel like we want to do just a little bit more, make it a little bit more cozy, a little bit more sweet, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more just extra. So this is something I think that's so valuable, is to give some thought to, what does enough mean for you today? And I see that we have some comments that I'm just going to share. Someone shared that they're grateful for the gift of life. My goodness, some years that is such an important principle. And grateful for each new day and meditation space. I love that. We're currently in a really small space. Some of you may know that. We're in the student housing at Harvard, and it's tiny. But still, we find ways to be grateful for the ease at which Amrama can get to his classes, the low cost, and the principles of kind of keeping life very simple. I always say it's a bit like ashram housing here. So I think for a long time, monks and priests and more renunciates lived in the particular housing that we're in that's associated with the Divinity School. So again, for me, this year isn't about a big celebration. This year isn't about hosting a bunch of people. It's about being hosted, which I have to say is the first time maybe since, like, I don't even remember, because Thanksgiving, if you all haven't guessed, is kind of the holiday that I really love and lean into. So I think this might be the first year in a really long time that I have not hosted. I think there was one year we went to see family in San Jose, my husband's family, and they have a big get together potluck for Thanksgiving, and I made a dish for that. Part of what we're sharing in terms of the Thanksgiving, if you will, model is coming out of positive psychology and Seligman's work. And there's a wonderful study which is referenced in the course material if you want to look at the PDF file, and talks about using cooking to find frameworks that give us psychological well-being. And they created this notion called the PERMA model, which I think is really woven into how the curriculum and how the material in this course has been brought together. But inherently, cooking can be a positive experience. I know for some people that feels like, ooh, I feel some friction when I hear that. But it can be a pleasurable experience. It invokes all of our senses. It can be a source of comfort, even pride, if we enjoy what we've made. Chopping, stirring, tasting, creating, foster differing types of mindfulness. If you have seen some of the things I share on social media, I'm very often chopping, chop, chop, chop. And for me, chopping vegetables is an incredibly mindful experience. I often have really important insights that come up when I'm chopping vegetables. And I've just learned it's a really important part of my day and how my day comes together. It's also a space for relationship building. And again, holidays can bring in complexities of that. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it's a place of sharing at mealtime, can be shared rituals and connection. It can strengthen social bonds. Meaning, cooking can link us to culture and identity, purpose, and caregiving. I really encourage people to lean towards their traditional family dishes. I don't think that this course or anything that I share is about telling people how to eat or that the holiday meals need to look a certain way. My hope is that we just can introduce more lighter foods, things that build our digestive capacity and don't leave us feeling quite as sluggish. And also, I love to see those traditional holiday dishes. Sometimes we rework them for a perspective that is perhaps less inflammatory or less calorically dense, but sometimes we just need that pumpkin pie that was Aunt Thelma's recipe. So it's not about permission or you should have it be one way or another, because these pieces of identity and culture link us to very important memories. And this year is the first year that everyone in my father's family is passed away. He had a smaller family, but everyone's gone. My dad, his sister, his parents, there weren't really uncles and aunts. So I'm also taking time to be tender, because every first 18 years, every Thanksgiving, we would get in our old VW bus. There's crazy stories of how there was no heat, and my brother and I would bundle up in sleeping bags, and we'd drive from Northern Virginia to Ohio. And we'd come into the kitchen, and we'd be comforted by all these rich smells of my dad's mom cooking. His father passed away quite young from cardiovascular disease, and my father also passed away quite young from cardiovascular disease. So for me, I know there's a sort of genetic component to atherosclerosis. So I've been very conscientious about that. It is something I have to pay attention to. And of course, if you have younger cooks in the kitchen, or you're a little bit older or later in life and learning new skills, it can actually give you a sense of confidence and self efficacy and internal mastery. Wow, I made that dish and it maybe wasn't as hard as I anticipated it being, or I stuck it out and I was able to do this. So I liked this model and I thought I would share this because I think this really speaks to a lot of the elements that are included. So, the heart of Thanksgiving is presence, gratitude, and self compassion. Wow, isn't that interesting? The menu's in there, but these are the principles that I think sit beneath that or above it, depending how your frameworks work, but that are informing the choices we make as we move through the holiday season. I think it's so valuable to bring in this idea of being fully present, but not having to be perfect in the kitchen. Again, it's so easy to lean towards it has to be perfect, and then the stress just starts magnifying. Having a sense of gratitude, honoring each step of the process in the hopes of others as well. Gosh, that can be complicated. Self compassion, choosing with care and intention how we show up for ourselves. Sometimes, in certain seasons of our life, maybe we're experiencing burnout, maybe we're more tired, or we're dealing with our own illness. It has to be a firm, this isn't going to work for me this holiday season. I hope it's really an enjoyable event. No explanations after that. Saying no can be a really important part of self compassion, choosing with care and intention how we show up into the things that we're called towards. And in the heart of all of that, cooking can be an act of connection with ourselves, with food, and with community. So, as we're looking at our whole food, plant based Thanksgiving, we have sort of a mindful menu approach. Plant rich dishes, excuse me, with minimally processed food that can be energizing and provide sustained energy versus peaks and valleys. It can give a space for heartfelt connections. And this is something I haven't put anywhere else in the course, but it's important to acknowledge how to help people slow down. Very often, there's someone who's spent 20 hours plus putting the meal together for everyone to eat very quickly. So, one of the things that we've done through the years is we have little cards, like unicorn cards, and we have one at everyone's plate. And at some point in the meal, we slow down and we ask people to reflect on the little message from the unicorn card. And there's a number of kind of conversation inviting card decks out there. You may want to think about getting something like that to integrate, to bring new points of inflection, new places to reflect on. The art of conversation and connection at mealtime has been lost. I think we're all so busy and busy with screen time at meals now. So this meal, if it's available to you, can be the backdrop for interesting new tidbits of conversation to help honor the cook who spent hours and hours trying to bring people together for this beautiful meal. We also want to acknowledge the coordinator of the meal as being a place where we can celebrate your energy, and it creates a space of your own peacefulness, allowing you to give from a place of abundance and not feeling a place of resentment. Some people feel a lot of obligation in the holiday season. And I think it's so valuable to circle back in and just remind ourselves that cooking can be an act of connection with ourselves, with food, and with community. Why this orientation to whole food plant based? Well, as you may recall, I have this additional training in lifestyle and integrative medicine. And for many years, I taught at the Andy Wiles Center in Tucson. And I did the nutrition curriculum and I brought food samples. And really, what I came to appreciate over time was that people didn't have a really deep connection to what leaves them feeling nourished. And it wasn't really until I did my Ayurvedic training, which is the traditional healing system from India, that I began to have a language for talking to people around what leaves you feeling nourished. And the definition, this is coming from an earlier article, it says a whole food plant-based diet emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds that have been shown to reduce inflammation, support energy metabolism, and promote health, consistently linked with lower risk of chronic disease and improved overall vitality. I found that always a little harder to translate in a practical way. So, what I like to ask people is, of course, keeping tabs on appropriate markers of inflammation, of prediabetes, diabetes, and cholesterol. And there's more, of course, you can explore with your clinician. What I think is important to keep in mind is, do you feel sleepy after the meal? Or does a meal leave you feeling slightly energized? Do you feel a heaviness when you wake up in the morning? Do you feel creative and focused towards things you endeavor towards? Do you have energy to exercise? Do you have daily bowel movements? Do you experience a lot of bloating, gas, reflux? These are some things that can be looked at. And I always encouraged people to explore and track those elements over time. So it's important to encourage people who may not be as inclined to have more plants or to substitute plants for dishes they're very familiar with, to ask them to have a noticing practice with the meal you might provide for them. How are you feeling before the meal, after the meal? Now, commonly in Thanksgiving, we tend to overeat a little, but it's still something that when the plate is full with plants, there's a sense of satiety that can come a little bit early. Then there's these kind of very well formed bowel movements from all of the fiber that's present in legumes, seeds, nuts, vegetables, and so on. So I like to think about it in the sense that, how do these foods nourish? We have the whole grains, which are complex carbohydrates. They give us steady energy, a sense of fullness. I love the idea of really incorporating leafy greens. They help cells by delivering antioxidants. Magnesium is a great source from leafy greens. Plant proteins are important sources to help us build muscle and maintain strength as we age. And healthy fats bring brains clarity, satiety. And healthy fats remains probably one of the most complicated questions. We won't dive into that in this webinar too deeply, but people certainly have vastly different ideas that inform them about what equals healthy fats. With my, I guess you could say, decades of study, kind of the conclusion I've come to is that adding whole fat foods that have the whole fat in them, like nut butters, avocado, and olives. And then I use primarily olive oil and extra virgin. So again, it's a personal choice. People have different dishes they need to use different ingredients for, but there are really fun techniques that help us maybe eliminate the need for fats. So I think if someone asks you why whole food plant based, and you're kind of like, I need that elevator pitch, you can say, well, you know, that end of season heaviness that comes. I want to go into the new year feeling light and vital. And I know a whole food plant based approach for me gives sustained energy, anti inflammatory, enhanced clarity, and digestive capacity. Now, the clarity piece is more coming from my Ayurvedic study. So just give me a little hall pass there. But the other ones we have plenty of Western scientific data for. But I'm always curious, and if you're rewatching this or have a thought about that, I think it's very true that eating these very nutrient dense plants can provide some increased mental clarity. I think cooking can be a healing practice, cooking as medicine, right? We hear so frequently food as medicine, but what about cooking and the presence of our heart, the presence of the styles of cooking that we bring? So I think in this, it's sort of interesting to think about, and this is a mindfulness based technique. What sense is most active for you when you're cooking? What sense is most active for you when you're cooking, and what sense is most active for you when you're planning? So, by that I mean, if you're cooking, does the sense of smell evoke a lot? Does cutting and texture really wake up something for you? Does the taste, the moment the taste hits your tongue, it could be all of them. But I think it's so interesting to think about what sense is active when you're cooking? And when you're planning, do you kind of remember a smell? Do you think about it? Do you remember shopping and hands-on vegetables? That's how my mom operates. She's very big on that. So I think it's important to recognize that cooking can be medicine. It can be a form of mindfulness, intentionality. And when we engage thoughtfully with our sensory input, it can provide us a pathway to regulating our nervous system. What a cool concept, right? We don't hear about that so often, but this is that merging of understanding the ancient sciences and what we're starting to appreciate about nervous system regulation. And by that, I mean our autonomic nervous system, which kind of vacillates between parasympathetic and sympathetic. And sympathetic is our, I'm going to fight flight here. I got to get it done. It's got to be perfect. And parasympathetic is the one we want to be, especially when we're digesting. It's what helps with peristalsis, enzyme release. It's a really important component. So if we bring relaxation into and think of cooking as a form of medicine, when we sit down to eat, that's going to extend forward. So some foundational cooking techniques that we learn in the course, which you may be familiar with, are steaming and roasting instead of frying. I think these beautiful dishes here to the left, these are steamed green beans with wild rice and dill, one of my favorite flavors, and I really only make it in the holiday season. But frying is something we can adjust in our palates, and water sauteing techniques can be wonderful substitutes for oil. I don't think you have to have no oil. You can put a tahini on at the end, a dressing. You can put olive oil on at the end. But fats are delicate, and cooking tends to denature them and break down those essential nutrients. So it's just something I think about as being important. Another thing I hear often is those vegetables don't look good. They look tired. They're a drab green. And so sometimes putting a lemon, a lime, or a vinegar kind of brightens the color and the flavor. So both of these dishes here that you see have some lemon squeezed on top. And another thing that I feel like needs as much emphasis as possible is the use of herbs and spices for depth and new flavors. They bring important plant information, they carry dense phytonutrients, and it balances flavors really beautifully for people that are used to dishes that are heavier in salt, heavier in oil or sugar. So the recipes in the course are sort of center around uses of spice and herbs, uses of acid, and steaming and roasting or steam sauteing over frying or making the dishes heavier. And a little bit of acid has been shown possibly to improve blood sugar regulation. Mechanism on that is really quite interesting. So how do you want to dig into planning for your meal? And I did want to point out that inside the course, and just so you know, this is once you've logged in, there's a cooking and meal planning section, and you can download this. There's a little button here in the upper right to download. But this is an opportunity for you to, this is a sample menu, how you might think about it. You can map out your week, what it might look like. You can think about your setup. You can think about what the meal time, how it's going to come together, add your own dishes. Here's a brief look at some of the things that are in the course. And then, want to think about this nourishing bowl, right? Protein is 1/4 of it, greens are 1/4, and then grains and fresh vegetables kind of fill the rest up. So this is what I'd like to see your Thanksgiving bowl or dish look like, really just filled with beautiful plant intelligence. There's a grocery list here for you to just give you a sense of thinking about. Nothing worse than arriving to the holiday and feeling like, oh, I forgot this, I'm running to the store. All these things sort of add up your stress level. And again, this is how I might put the week together, and things that can be made in advance. That's a sample. And then here's where you can fill it in for yourself. So again, this is just a way to think about, again, you can use any combination and you build in your own, ingredients and favorite dishes into this. But I love to encourage too, especially those of you that might be on a budget, to plan around seasonal produce. Squashes are in season, pumpkins. The cruciferous vegetables are fully here. They like the colder weather. You can go to bulk sections and get your grains and legumes and cook them yourself. You can look for fresh herbs and spices that are little growing pots, and then you'll have them for after the holidays. You can use frozen fruits and frozen vegetables if you're in spaces that don't have as much access. I think it's important too to think about your leftover strategy. We'll have a little section on that coming up. And I think it's essential, really, if you're preparing food for a larger group, to keep flavors flexible, honoring your mood, your energy, and the family's needs as people shift through seasons of their own life, the seasons of the planet. So this is just a small call to you, is what small shift could simplify your weekly cooking rhythm outside of the holiday season? Would it be having some recipe cards that people pick? Would it be having a standing shopping list that someone shops for you if you're very busy in a professional career that requires a lot of your bandwidth? Swing by on the way home and have your Whole Foods or Instacart pickup. I'd love for you to think about what is a small shift that could simplify your weekly cooking rhythm. And that may include including someone else, getting more help in the kitchen. Now, one thing that comes up in the holiday season without question is how to navigate others' needs and energy. And this is something that becomes really essential if you are um, the mother with aging parents and younger kids or teenage kids, or you're someone that is sort of the middle glue of the family. And you feel that stretch as people come in with all kinds of demands. Or you may be traveling, and somewhere where you're traveling has a lot of preferences that don't align with your values. So, this is that place of just giving yourself compassion, knowing how to say no, knowing how to step away, and knowing what are the skills that you need, what are the things you need to pour into your cup that helps you stay grounded and less reactive, centered, we say, when others' preferences differ from yours, and it can be kind of confrontational. For me, I know I actually just need time alone. I know. It's pretty simple, but I just need spaces where I'm away from everyone and I can just let the shoulders come down, let the breath come into a normal rhythm. So that's what works for me. So let's think about energy in the kitchen, right? So now we're thinking about cooking as medicine. We've engaged our senses. How do we manage energy in the kitchen? These are some things that I think are valuable to think about. Okay, I'm chopping vegetables and shoulders are coming up. Breath is not coming through. I'm just using those tiny accessory muscles. Okay, can I exhale and enjoy? And a lot of times I do that when I smell something before I make a dish. Now, we have a running joke in our household because it's kind of said that I cook with my heart, which means I'm not that often using recipes. I kind of like to talk to the food when it arrives and say, what would you like to be made into today? And what's in my cooking creative Rolodex that would be fun to make with you? So when I have especially fresh herbs, I will break them and I'll just give them a really deep smell. And suddenly I feel that already those volatile oils are entering my body. And of course, the aromatics of winter, garlic or ginger, which are a little bit different than herbs, or rosemary, thyme, oregano. Well, you can feel those aromatics. They have antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, antiviral properties. So bringing them into our meals makes a lot of sense. Let go. This also applies to like digestion, right? We need to be able to let go of what we've digested. And so giving the kitchen space being an opportunity to release what isn't serving in the process. It could be uninviting someone from cooking with you. I've done that kindly. Oh, you know what? It'd be great if you could help me put the napkins on the table, because who knows? Maybe they're bringing in an energy that's just not meshing with how I want to be there. Creativity. Sometimes this is a really different path, right? How do we explore and bring creative energy into the cooking journey? Do we have some cookbooks, Pinterest boards, save recipes on Instagram, blogs that we like, Facebook groups we go to? There's a lot of different spaces we can pull creativity from. And this one again is as a little more abstract, but coming from these Eastern traditions is, can we bring our heart energy into the process and have a prayer go into the food, a blessing, if you will, from our heart saying, may this, I'm grateful for the hands that grew this, harvested this, transported this. I'm grateful for my hands that have prepared this, and can this food be a blessing for the people that will receive it? So I really think our energy, if you will, is abstract a little bit, becomes a part of the meal. And so again, just a little prompt here, but how do you check in with others when you're planning a meal, and how do you ask for help? How does that show up for you? All right, we're a little past mid-session because I had no volume on at the beginning. But again, this is just a pause, right? We're digesting, we're bringing into our consciousness, our awareness, emotions, and principles around meals. So I'd love for you to just take this moment and think about what's come up for you as you've explored this material, if you've been inside the material in the course or just in this session. And how can you create some awareness for yourself and others as you prepare for this very busy season? I kind of feel like these days it starts with Halloween, but really the next 5 weeks become very frenetic, as we well know. And habits that we've worked hard to cultivate all year are harder to maintain. So a lot of things I hear often people say to me, well, there's 10 things that I can't say no to. Well, I like also for you to remember how to say yes to yourself. And that could even just be a yoga practice in the morning, a connection to early morning light, a brief walk in your lunch break, calisthenics, an app you can use to stay in motion. Another thing I think that's really good and helpful to do is sipping on teas. So teas that have a kind of pungent quality, things like ginger, hibiscus, cardamom, chai teas. Maybe not chai tea with all the sugar, but rich spices, star anise, black pepper, clove. How can those things kind of wake up your digestion? And I just realized we don't have a recipe for chai in the course, and I'm going to add the one we like to make in our slow cooker that is my husband's creme de la creme. He used to make chai tea for 2,000 people at a yoga event. So he is the chai expert, master, I would say. So, in this kind of pausing space, what are you sensing about your current plans that may be exciting to you, but you need to pull back on a little to honor your own rhythm? Or when you sense into your current plans, is there some extra energy, some extra space where there's something else you want to focus on? It's important to just take that moment to check in. Some seasons we have lots of extra energy, and we're really excited to bring people together who maybe wouldn't always be at the same table. Other seasons of life, gosh, we've gone through a lot. My husband just finished submitting a book, and our system is a little depleted from that because it was a 24/7 near finish line for him. And he's writing a book on grief, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. And we may have a visit from him here shortly. So, how do you want to reimagine your holiday? How do you set intentions? And what specific purpose or focus could guide your Thanksgiving celebration this year that's different from before? All right. So, how do you want to feel at the end of your holiday season? Again, we're kind of circling back to that question we asked at the beginning. Do you want to feel energized, peaceful, connected, joyful? Such a gamut. So, working with resistance, the grittier part. And I think for a lot of us, we can feel resistance come up in our body as tension. Our body kind of freezes up, or we notice that, oh my goodness, I can feel my heartbeat in my ears. And we may not verbalize that, but people can sense those changes happening in our nervous system. So, again, this is a practice of sort of seed planting for later in the season. Where do you feel resistance? And what kind of small shift might soften that for you? So, we want you to notice the tension and just let that soften. Release control by choosing presence, curiosity, and small little steps, which can actually be very courageous when we've been triggered by a situation or we're really resisting the XYZ that inevitably comes up in the holiday season. I would love to encourage everyone to release perfection in the holiday season. It does not need to be perfect at all to be nourishing. And so, what is possible to feel like is enough and what can be simplified in your approach? There's things that give you small little pieces of it's easier to do it this way. I want us to recognize as well that gratitude feeds our internal awareness. As we pour gratitude into ourselves or into others, it gets digested into wisdom. Gratitude is a builder of internal awareness as we move towards wisdom, which I think a lot of us hope for as we get older. So, remembering that lens of gratitude as a transformative agent. So, I never think it's good to say, what about this silver lining or that silver lining of no, there are oftentimes no silver linings to certain situations, but gratitude of what has evolved or what was possible helps us shift those experiences into our lived journey. And that expression can become really potent and very powerful. This is my call to have you reach out to someone who might be alone this holiday. Maybe they don't come to your meal, but is there some way you can create connection in a mealtime with them? Perhaps they come over for leftovers. Perhaps you are someone who is alone and not sharing the holiday with someone. Can you use some of the principles and recipes from the course to ask 3 or 4 people to make something and come together and share the time? It is important to have connection in the holiday seasons. I find this is extremely stressful and brings up a lot of grief and sadness for people who may be alone or experiencing grief. And grief in the holidays is something I'm going to have my husband pop in here and talk about. And we're going to just trade seats. He's going to come take a seat and he's going to talk about grief in the holidays for about 5 minutes. And I think this is such an important area and it's one that he's quite an expert in. And then he's going to teach you a breath exercise. So we're going to trade seats here. Give us 1 second. And oh, by the way, my husband is Amratma, and I'll tell you more. I'll let him tell you more about him when he sits down.
Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be here and very grateful to be able to support you. I am recovering from a completion of a book, and so I apologize for just being tired and feeling the experiences of the special weight of holding grief care in a educational way that helps us transform the way we might think about not just grief itself as something wrong or a problem to solve, but really as a narrative that is asking us to hold it with greater tenderness and love and compassion. In my work, I like to talk about grief as a story of love, a story of love that is looking for a place to land, a story of love that is looking for a place to go. And so much in our society and in our culture, we are driven by trying to get over it, trying to move on and try to let go, as if grief was a problem that needed to be solved. And yet, it's such a universal experience asks of us to bring tenderness and sweetness into the experience, compassion. And so as you arrive into this holiday season, I know that it can be heavy for some of you. This season brings about greater feelings of loss, more memories come in, nostalgia, things of the past that were left undone, the should haves, the would haves, the could haves. There's a powerful force that happens when the light becomes darker, the days become shorter. We are asked to go more within. And as we arrive into that deeper space of our own heart, it brings in feelings that we might not have processed or don't know really where to go with. And inherently, because we really haven't been taught about grief and grief emotions, there's a sort of powerlessness, a sort of freeze that comes into the body about what to do. Our natural tendency is to go to things that make us avoid those feelings or mask them or to suppress them as a way to sort of buffer the pain because it's just so unbearable. Often the location we go for that is food, sweet food or heavier foods, foods that are associated with, um, you know, uh, greater processed to them. Because when we don't know what to do with big feelings like grief, we tend to swallow them back. But we know that the body keeps a score, and we know that inflammation comes in many ways. And we also know that there is an emotional inflammation that comes with that. And so when we utilize food as a way to buffer, ironically, there's a catch 22 to this. It makes us feel heavier, and the weight of those emotions become more present in our life. While there might be an immediate experience of maybe softening, and I do it myself, and so I'm guilty of it in my own right. It ends up leading to the places within our physiology that can hold grief, the tenderness that's held through the heart, become less accessible. We become numb, not only in our body, but become numb in our emotions and then carry a greater heaviness that makes it more challenging to go through. This becomes a perpetuated cycle for many of us as we move through these times, these difficult experiences, but also death anniversaries and birthdays and so forth. And so I wanted to give a different experience and a different relationship to how we might think about grief in a different way. Instead of something we swallow back, something we suppress, something that we separate from ourselves, what if we let our grief breathe? What if we gave it a permission to express? What if we moved not away from it, but towards it just gently, just sweetly, with just a compassion, and recognizing that maybe it's just a story of love that is looking for a place to go? What if it's asking for permission just to have a moment of acknowledgement or a recognition that by giving it just a little bit of a space, just a moment of turning towards, that the tears start to fall, that the heaviness that's felt in the chest is just felt, not changed, that that lump in the throat is just a call towards an expression rather than swallowing back. And so, in your holiday experience, knowing that this is a very tender moment of conversation speaking about grief, what if the sweet treats or the heavy foods or the alcohol that we might be drawn towards to numb our feelings is a call towards nourishment of a different kind, a nourishment of sweetness of community and of friendships? That the heaviness that we feel is like a pressure cooker that's inside that's looking just for a release valve, just to have a moment of expression, of an exhaled breath, and that the nourishment that we're looking for is really a tenderness of turning towards our grief just a little bit, to give ourselves a spaciousness to be with instead of pushing away. And so with that, I want to lead you through a breath exercise that I think that can be helpful. It's my go-to practice, something that you could practice at any time, even at the dinner table that can feel really difficult, or a moment that just needs a moment of reprieve. And so in this breath exercise, we'll be utilizing it as a way to help create like a physiological hack. We know that emotions rise very powerfully in the body, but they rise like flowers. They're just seeking to blossom and bloom. And we know that when they rise, they just wilt away and die. So our practice here is to help reconnect to a parasympathetic experience physiologically, so that we can create a relaxation response, so that when emotion rises within us, we're not triggered by fear or by survival, but by a tenderness to be with it without reactivity. And so in that way, we recognize that a relaxed body creates a quiet mind. that creates an open heart. And it's that movement that we're looking for. So let's take a moment and breathe together. Take a nice inhale and exhale fully and completely. And a deep breath. And a deep exhale. Very good. Now on this inhale through the nose, hold it for just a moment. And now through the pursed lips, let's exhale that breath very slowly, very tenderly. Good. Well done. Let's take a nice deep inhale again. And hold that breath for just a moment. And now very slowly, very consciously, let's slowly exhale the breath through the pursed lips. And as you exhale that breath, let it be just twice as long as your inhale. Good. Let's take a nice deep breath together again. And hold. And now slow exhale, even slower. Good. Deep breath here. Hold the breath. And subtle and slow and deeper and longer exhale. Control it, command it with all your might. Make it as long and as quiet as you can. And one last time now. Deep breath. Nice and slow, nice and quiet. Through the lips, feel the coolness. Exhale that breath. Yeah, very good. Nice deep breath here. Smooth inhale. Smooth exhale. Good. Smooth inhale. Smooth exhale. Once again, smooth inhale. Smooth exhale. That's right. That's right. The sadness physiologically is a lot of inhales, but requires and asks for very slow and long exhales. It is in that way we soften in our experience to the sadness that rises, recognizing that grief itself is not an emotion, but a response that comes with many emotions at the same time. And by the ability to create a spaciousness to feel is a power that can help not transform our grief, but transform yourself in your ability to hold grief. What you might feel so small to the feelings that are so big, this breath exercise helps you feel big and strong and mighty, large, and then the grief and the emotions feel smaller in your relationship to. And it's in that way that we can hold with greater tenderness, because grief is just love looking for a place to go. Give it space, let it flow. Letting go is letting that love flow. So very grateful to be able to share with you for just a few minutes here around the tender art of grieving, and wishing you lots of love in this holiday season.
Thanks, babe. Okay, we're going to finish up. What a treat. He hasn't been here available for any of the other sessions. And so grateful you all could be with him here today. I so appreciate his heart. So we're going to, and thank you. Congratulations on the book. Appreciate that. So this is, we're going to conclude on time. I'm always grateful when that happens. But I want you to think about, what can you carry forward in these principles? And sorry, there's a little typo there. And, just for a fun kind of exercise, if your day had a flavor, what would it be? Is it sweet? Is it spicy? Is it pungent? We're allowed to have our flavor, our personality come into the whole process. And that honoring and in that holding of our own internal integrity is what gives us the ability to approach the holiday season in a way that we can actually digest, right? In that Ayurvedic model, we think about digesting at a mind, body, spirit level. It's so valuable to think about, can I digest a big meal, lots of company and friction and my own resistance? No, I am maxed out in my career right now. So we can come into that relationship of what's possible. So I want to thank you. I'm so grateful for the time that you've set aside and the time that we've created in this course together. If you have someone who might benefit from this webinar, feel free to pass on the registration link. I'll just be sending out the replay in a couple days. If people want to register later, it'll just be a replay. But you never know. There may be someone in your family or in your friend group or in your professional group that could really benefit from hearing some of these words. And of course, these intentions can carry us all the way through the holiday season. And this is really just my husband and I, it's our gift to the communities that we work with and the places that we serve to share some of the insight and knowledge that we have